Hello and welcome to Breaking It Down Grant Proposals. This is the program and project description part 2. So just a few review of some components and some different key concepts of grant writing or grant proposal writing. Components of the proposal include executive summary, statement of need, project description, budget and narrative, organization information, conclusion, and appendices. Tonight, we will go over just a couple of the pieces, specifically the project or program description, the nuts and bolts of how the project will be implemented and evaluated. The purpose of any grant application is the logical reason why the grant or the proposal should be supported. Tell the grant reader the purpose of the grant request, develop a purpose statement. The purpose statement shouldn't exceed one sentence, but include amount requested. So here's an example. The Grant Writing Training Foundation is seeking your initial and ongoing financial support in the amount of $10,000 for its Missouri Road Trip Grant Writing Training Program. And so that's usually part of, say, your cover letter. So what are evidence-based practices? So we want to look and make sure that we are researching everything and we're utilizing the best practices or the research that supports the practices that are put in place. And so there's many programs out there that you can utilize as examples or replicate some of those particular programs. Evidence-based practice can be defined as the integration of the best research evidence with professional expertise and community values in making practice decisions. So you see these areas right here. Evidence, you have your expertise, or your discipline expertise, and then you have the community and client values or the organizational values and goals. You want to describe the need, statement of need, it may be called statement of need, problem statement, statement of problem, needs assessment, or even the literature review, depending on your funder's requirements. This is to really justify the need for the services and what programs or project that you are going to implement. You explain why your proposal is important and how it's going to impact your community or your target population. Clarify the need or program or problem that your project or program responds to, and clarify why this project will make a bigger or positive impact on society, the community, your target population, so forth. Establish the context of this problem, say the background, where did it come from, how is it initiated, what are some key things that need to be included or to key considerations in working with a specific target population or specialized vulnerable populations. Learning about the program and the stakeholders and the beneficiaries. So we look at key stakeholders of an organization. So, and your primary key stakeholder are those that are impacted by, say, the policy or the program, those that will, in theory, actually receive help from the project or program. So they're going to receive the impact. So they are the participants of the program or clients or whatever the program or organization calls their consumers, then they will be the primary stakeholders. But other stakeholders are key funders, key political structures or leaders in the community or in the organization, and also a representation of all the key stakeholders that should be involved in this change process. So you ask about the program. A lot of different organizations actually have previous grant proposals that you can ask to get a copy of or to see the grant proposal. It doesn't have to be one of their winning one with their proprietary information, but one that they say maybe have written and did not get the funding, that you can kind of start out. Or if they've written one that it at least have the program description and some of the information, so you're not having to go back and ask them. So you want to be familiar enough with the program, specifically the program's goal, resources, activities, and what they hope to, or outcomes, what they hope to achieve, their impact, their mission, their vision, those different types of things. When did the program start? When does it end? Does it end? Are you going to enhance it? Are you going to expand it? And where is the program taking place? So specific communities, there are specific grants out there for specific communities or specific target populations. So whatever the funding that you're writing for, make sure that you're writing to what that funder is requesting of you and your organization. A general model for program planning is, and this is just a general model. So assessing the needs, you want to make sure that you're doing that as you plan the program, or as you plan, specifically as you plan to write about the program, assessing the needs, setting the goals and objectives, developing an intervention, implementing the intervention, and evaluating the results. So that program, your program description should have all of these specific needs or specific areas. Models assist program planners with developing effective behavior change interventions, and on different levels, macro level specifically is what we're referring to. So a program, here's a checklist of the program information that is usually in the program that you may ask for or request from the organization. The nature of the project and how it will be conducted and who will be conducting it, the timetable for the project, and the anticipated outcomes and how best to evaluate the results. Sometimes organizations will allow you to actually see their logic model or their strategic plan, which will give you some of this information. And for you to do a complete review of the grant application, including like a lead sheet, like we've discussed before, like a lead sheet or something like that, so that the organization know what they're going to be required to do for the grant and how to administer it and budget it out and so forth, including making sure that they have the outcomes and any results that they've had and any achievements that they've had around the program previously, or if it's a new program, how to really flesh out that program to make sure that the funder knows how it's being implemented, the fidelity of the program, is it evidence-based? Those different things really add value to your grant proposal. So again, the subsections of a project or program description is the goal statement. So what the goal statement is, and we'll talk more about those: objectives, methods, staffing and administration, evaluation, and sustainability. So that all of that goes into a grant, into a program description. So your program description is usually your program and project description is usually your largest part of your narrative, because it has to be so detailed so that the funder knows exactly what you're doing and that they can actually follow the steps. Now you want to make sure that you're also providing visual aids for these, whether it's in the appendices or whether it's within the narrative of the document. And so make sure that you're following whatever requirements, including page length or section length, that your funder is requiring. So goal statements. So goal statements are just, you should have SMART goal statements, just like SMART goals and SMART objectives. So they should your goal statement should include specific information, state what you'll do, and use action words: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And so we'll look at some examples of those. This particular example or this particular graphic came from fitsmallbusiness.com. You can see it right there. It is a common mistake to draft a paragraph or develop multiple sentences describing the purpose or goal of the organization. Avoid doing this at all costs. Effective grant proposals summarize the goal or goals into one sentence that describes the foundational purpose for addressing the primary need within the target population or the audience. So it's not specifically, this is not talking about, say, the specific goals. This is a goal statement. Similar to like your mission or your vision, you're going to reiterate that within the statement, and then break down within that section, within the program description or project description section, and then break that down from into goals, objectives, so forth. And we'll talk more about those. So when you're looking at, and it's common for people to mix both what a goal is and what a objective is. And so here you'll see the definitions here. A goal is more a long-term purpose that a person or organization strives to achieve, whereas the objective is more specific and exact actions that they need to take to reach the goals. So the objective really supports a goal. And then you can see here the end result, a means to the end. So you can see these different comparisons of a goal and objective here. In addition to increasing, this is an example, increase the customer base would be your goal. So that's ambiguous, that's very generalized. And then the objective is more specific, acquire 20% more customers from each country in the next 3 months. And so it's time bound, and it has all the smart sections of or smart components of for each one of them. So smart objectives, and this is just a visual aid to show the difference between smart objectives and objectives that may not be smart. And so you see the details here, whereas here, make new sales as soon as possible to bring in revenue. That's a very ambiguous. It could be considered a goal, but a very, very loose goal, and that goal would not increase patient satisfaction. Very straight to the point. However, you can see that that's more of would lend towards more of a goal. And so making sure, and even these would not be really smart goals. So you want to expand on these. And so that's just a visual kind of showing what smart objectives are and the detail that they may have in there and the components of a smart objective as opposed to not. So you want to look at, and this is just an example. So you usually have a goal, an outcome, or a process objective, depending on what type of evaluation that you're going to attach to it. And we'll talk more about that, not at length, just for this particular class or this particular workshop. We don't want to go into too much detail, but we will describe or talk about both types of these. So it may just be the goal, outcome objective or a process objective, and then your activity. So at least 2 to 3 levels. Your goal usually comes first and is flush to your left, and it is first level. On your first level, your outcomes or your outcome objective or process objective is usually second or third level, depending on how many goals you have. And then the activity is the next level. And in a lot of now program descriptions, they also include, especially in the narrative. Now, this may be a visual of it, and we'll talk a little bit more about the narrative in a few moments. So a helpful hint, begin a goal statement with the word to. A lot of mission statements and or vision statements may also begin that way. And so you can utilize those to help develop your goal statement, which implies that an action is going to occur. And then here's an example of that: to improve access to behavioral health services for 80% of individuals enrolled in the Tri-County Wellness Program in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan within 5 years. This statement begins with the to, so it is action oriented. It states the purpose: improve access to healthcare services. It also says for whom it's going to benefit: individuals, or who's going to participate in the program, individuals 200% below the poverty line, and where it's going to take place in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the time frame within the next 5 years. And so that's a goal statement. Here is the goal statement, and this is just a breakdown of that. So program planning objectives, there's two primary types of objectives that we utilize. One is an outcome objective. It's a statement of the amount of change expected for a specified population within a given time frame. So the outcome, that's an outcome objective, the amount of change, what is going to be the outcome. And you'll see some of those, and we'll talk about how that looks from a perspective, because you can usually take a logic model and apply it to your goals and objectives, and we'll talk about that. Process objectives is a statement that measures the amount of change expected in the performance and utilization of interventions that impact on the that have an impact on the outcome. So process and outcome really can explain, it really explains itself. And the outcome is exactly what it says: the amount of change expected as an outcome. So what are the outcomes of your program or your project? And then the process is how you do actually implement the project, or in its fidelity. And we'll look at more examples of that. Defining goals and objectives. Setting goals and objectives requires translating the concepts and ideas generated into concrete terms. A goal states that overall outcome expected, not measurable, describes the expected outcome, focuses on ends, not means. And then objective defines the means. So once again, it builds on, so if you're going from the bottom to the top, that action or those activities and tasks should go into actually achieving the objectives and achieving those measurables in those objectives. And then those objectives are also looking at or achieving those goals. So if you look at it from the bottom up, then you're looking at the activities and tasks that help or support the objectives, and the objectives then achieve and support the goal, or vice versa. Goals, then the objectives support that goal or achieving that goal, and then the task and activities actually support and achieve the objectives. So here's another, just some information. Objectives can be developed around each of the proposed interventions or approaches. So around a project, personnel, practice, program, policy. A complete objectives has 4 parts: a time frame, a target, a result, and a criterion for measuring or documenting the result. And then the types of objectives, again, here are outcome objectives and process objectives are the primary ones that we utilize. Here's another, just some more information for you on writing goals and objectives that move you towards your vision. And so you can see here the different levels that I was talking about earlier. Here's the goal, here are the objectives, and then you can break the objectives down into further objectives. And so there's outcome objectives here, and then process objectives here. And so you can have both. They really help you to really monitor and manage your program if you have both, because one really monitors the progress towards that outcome, whereas the process one really monitors and ensures the fidelity of the process itself. So here's a work plan and timeline. So you can see the goal here, the objectives here, the activities here, what's the product that's going to be produced from this activity, the person responsible, and the time frame. And so this is like a timeline or work plan or action plan, maybe some of the terms you may hear. Again, here's another example of the goal and objectives. Like I said, level 1, the goal, if we look at a logic model, that would be the impact section of the logic model. The level 2, the outcomes would be, so the outcome objective could be some of the short, intermediate, and or long-term outcomes that are on a logic model. So we'll look at a logic model, and there's an example for you. In addition to level 2 or 3, also are the process objective. Remember the example that we have right here. This is just in narrative form and in bullet form. And so the process objectives are more of the outputs. And again, we'll look at the logic model, which will make a lot more sense. And then your activities and tasks, their strategies, evidence-based practices, etc., that help achieve the objectives. And then the evaluation plan. Sometimes this is added, especially in the narrative part, so that it has a clean a section, so that a reviewer or the funder can go through there and see the narrative for your goals and objectives and see the breakdown of each one of them. Or you can do a separate evaluation plan that also works, just depending on how you really set it up. And if your program piece if you're able to expand your program piece, or that's your largest page piece or page numbers, page range, if that's your largest page range, then you want to incorporate as much information in that programming piece as possible, so that you make sure that you are detailing the story of what your program actually does and the benefit, and supporting that, supporting the benefit of the program and the evidence-based practices of the program. Here's another timeline for like administrative activities. And so you see the months here. And this is a 36 months, so 3-year program. And these are the activities that are going to take place. And so these activities would go under each one of your objectives to help to achieve the different objectives and the objectives that achieve the goals. Here's another slide about objectives. This one has an example here. Our after-school program will help children read better. The objective, our after-school remedial education program will assist 50 children in improving their reading scores by 1 grade level, as demonstrated by standardized reading tests administered after participating in the program for 6 months. So apparently there was a program that showed improvement in the test or reading test, the standardized reading test, within a 6-month period. And so that is, sometimes the objectives are actually just because of the fidelity, the proprietary part of, say, a curricula. If you adopt somebody else's curricula, it may already be evidence-based, and so you check that, and you can utilize that as this is an evidence-based practice, or this is evidence-based training, or this is educational, an evidence-based education model that has been adopted by all of the United States, or whatever that looks like. And that could be, and that's a big, especially with programs that are evidence-based and that have been shown to be replicated. Utilizing those strategies are awesome, instead of trying to justify and add credibility and support to your own curricula. So you can reference, you can utilize pieces if that's allowed, based on the patent or whatever, if it's allowed for you to actually utilize that as is, or if you're able to actually modify the curricula. You can usually the curricula can be, the specific task and activities can be changed, but they sometimes give you the goals and the objectives, the goals and the learning objectives of the curricula if you adopt one. There are three types of objectives. We talked about process and we talked about outcome, or they're also called performance objectives, and we won't go too much in detail in those. But there are indicators, KPIs, key performance indicators and things like that that go into that. So we won't go into that in its entirety. Another objective is project objective. Identifies a tangible product such as a report, newsletter, video, etc., created for the purpose of addressing the identified need. If the applicant is using a logic model framework, the process and product objectives fit nicely as outputs. So that's a key point. So that you're not really spinning your wheels and having to actually find all of this information every time at the specific grant. It is always a good thing to every few years go in there, or as information changes in your industry, to go in there and actually update the evidence-based practices and or research that has been found, or incorporate the research that say your organization has done in the past 3 to 5 years. The three main characteristics of effective performance objective statements include the following: indicate a time in history, reflect a change in behavior or accomplishment by the target population or audience, signify how the change in the target population or audience behavior will be measured or tested. For example, score 80% or better on the safety aptitude test. Here's an example of an example statement for performance objective. And outcome or performance objective: by this particular time, participating, or another action word, describe the target population will and what the behavioral achievement or accomplishment will be. Identifying approximately 3 to 6 objectives in the grant to meet the primary goal is reasonable. Too many objectives lead to a grant that is not only too complex for a grant reviewer to track the logic, but also too complex for the applicant to adhere to. So don't make it so detailed that you have to follow it, in rote. So remember, align objective to your goals. Objectives should be one statement only, include time of accomplishment, 6 months, year, in 30, 60, 90 days, 180 days, target population centered and measurable. So here are 4 types of objectives: behavioral objectives. So a human action is anticipated out of this. So 50 of the 70 children participating will learn how to swim. Though that's an example. Performance one, a specific time frame, behavior will, within which a behavior will occur at an unexpected proficiency level is expected. And there's an example of that. Process, the manner in which something occurs in and end in itself, a means to an end. So how it gets there, the process that we will document the teaching methods utilized, identifying those with the greatest success, or that, this has been shown to be evidence-based, and we will utilize these same methods, or whatever that looks like. And then product, a tangible item, results. Example, a manual will be created to be used in teaching swimming to this age and proficiency groups in the future. So what's going to come out of it? A newsletter, a PSA video, whatever that may look like. So but like I said, the 2 primary one are the outcome or performance one right here, and the process objective are the 2 primary ones that we utilize in macro practice. What are inputs, outputs, outcomes, and impact? And so you can see here, this is a logic model. This right here, you can see this is your plan work. So these are the inputs, these are the resources, these are the human capital, relational capital, and structural capital. So the intellectual capital are the inputs. The activities are what the project does, what the program does to fulfill its mission. So it provides what it provides: weekly educational or skills-based training on various interpersonal skills and problem-solving training. The volume of work accomplished by the project. So what is accomplished, what has been accomplished, or what is being accomplished from your planned work right here. So what are these things? The volume of work accomplished by the project. So what these did. So from your programs, you served 450 participants, usually a quantity, the number of projects, the number of case studies, the number of people served, the number, percentage of the population. Those different things are your outputs. These are your intended results. Typically, even your planned work can include the outputs, because these are things that you have, and these are the resources you have, but these are the things that your program already does. And so you're gonna have some outputs here, in addition to then take those outputs and develop your intended results in your outcomes and your impact. Okay, we won't go into too much detail, but here again, here are the key concepts: the inputs, the activities, the outputs, the outcomes, and the impact. And here are those concepts explained and what questions are usually asked in what areas. This is the implementation, this is operational, and this is developmental results, and that you look at. Okay, here's just the categories usually of a work plan, logic model, and narrative. So it may have this particular section. This may be a visual that's there, the goal statement, the objectives, and those broken out, outcome, process, those, and you can expand this part of it. And then the inputs, the activities, the budget, the timeline. And so this could be your visual aid that really explains each, and really explains your goals and objectives and the impact. So it's really, this right here is really a narrative, but also a visual part of your narrative, and visual aids or appendices that breaks down or gives you a real visual aid to look at what's going on. So what the budget is for these inputs and activities, what the budget is, what the timeline is, the outcome, the outputs, the processes, those different things, and just really breaking down that logic model. So program and project description is the narrative of the work plan logic model, and includes the evaluation and the sustainability plan. So like I said, you can really break this down and kind of just write this out before you start typing this, or develop this as a visual aid or appendices for your appendices, and then just go in and make sure that you're explaining this particular visual in extensively or comprehensive. Okay, and here we have outcomes. So the final or ultimate goal, and these are the outcomes: reduce incident of reoccurrence of DV in at least 75% participating families. That's the final or ultimate goal. And these are the intermediate outcomes, I'm sorry. Increase in self-esteem, lowered social anxiety. So the reduce the incidence, they're going to reduce the incidence of this by 75% of the participating families. So that's your long-term outcome, or your long-term goal, can be used as your goal. And then here are some of the outcomes that will come from those: mastery of job skills, those different things to have this particular impact, or to achieve this goal. Methods, how this is a detailed description of what will occur from the time the project begins until it is completed. Your method should match the previously stated objectives. So make sure that, again, that visual aid will help you to really flesh out and to make sure that you are also including the methods part of a detailed description of that, when the methods section should present the order and timing for the task. And then why you may need to defend your chosen methods, especially if they are new or unorthodox. So if you're, you're out the box thinker or thinking, and you want to do that. So I want to always caution you about those, because chosen or methods, new methods, or unorthodox, or you don't really have research to back it up, really takes a lot of credibility. And a lot of times that takes a lot of research that, say, you've conducted under an IRB or more extensively. So a lot of organizations, especially nonprofit or human service organizations, they do not do that. And so you want to make sure that your methods actually fit your objectives and goals and objectives that you've already developed. Staffing and administration for the project or the program only. So with the understanding that organizations can write for each part of, or specific parts of their program. Now, they can't get the same funding to do the same thing. However, if they have say if they have a youth program and a young adult program and then a senior program, each one of those programs within itself can get different funding. They can't really combine the funding. So the staff number, the qualifications, and the role, especially those that will administer and in charge of really managing the program. So like your directors, your supervisors, those who are responsible for making sure that the program runs in its fidelity, or the project does, or whoever's over the project. The time efforts to ensure the time requirements of the paid staff, current staff, delineate the experience, expertise, and the educational background of the key staff. Make sure to provide additional documentation for project director responsible for overall project operations, and detail how the project will be administered. Table of goal, task, and responsible parties, etc. So similar to previous visuals that we've looked at, it also includes a date. It's just in different order. This is the activity. This is the date. This is who is responsible for it. These are the methods that they will utilize. Face-to-face meetings, those different flyers, whatever, phone calls. And then the benchmarks, weekly contact to every elder here. So you have your goals and objectives here, and then this is how to provide your project timeline or your program timeline. Evaluation. So this is a very intensive piece of it. So we're going to do an overview, but we will come back through and also review this and break this down even more as we move throughout the end of the project. Evaluation is really very, very important. There are several types of evaluation that is utilized in human service organization and programs and project in the social service realm. One measures the product, other analyze the process and strategies you've adopted. So describe how the data will be collected and analyzed, develop evaluation indicators. Is it a process evaluation? So it measures the activities, the number of trainings, meetings. Is it an outcome evaluation? Measures the short term, long, medium, and long term, or intermediate and long term outcomes, increased understanding, behavior change, health outcomes, those different types. So here you can look at, say, the process, doing a process evaluation and breaking that process evaluation down from your logic model into inputs, outputs, and outcomes. That's just a picture right there. We won't go into detail. If you choose to go into program evaluation or some other classes, then you'll go through this in its entirety. Okay, here are some different types of evaluation: formative evaluation, process evaluation, impact, and outcome evaluations. And so here are some different here's a visual to kind of help you to kind of conceptualize these particular different types of evaluations. I like this particular visual aid because it really breaks down and shows you the connection or the correlation between the logic model and the evaluation. So in the logic model, you have your inputs, your outputs, your outcomes, and your impact over here. These are assumptions that you have at the beginning. These are the external factors that are in play here. And so here's the types of evaluation that are utilized, that utilize the logic model, typical types. The need asset assessment. What are the characteristics, needs, and priorities of the target population? So a needs or asset-based assessment. A process evaluation. How is the program implemented? Are the activities delivered and as intended? Those, how the process goes, what happens, how are they assessed? Is there an intake, then assessment? Then how do you plan, go their goals and objectives, or their goals that they will achieve during the programming or intervention. And then the outcome, to what extent are desired changes occurring or are the goals met? And then impact evaluation, to what extent can changes be attributed to the program itself? Because if you can, and that's usually done, a lot of times you'll see for the impact evaluations, you will see that the quasi experimental, so with the control group and other groups, the placebo group and the control group and the primary group as part of the research. And here's an evaluation plan template. What will we evaluate? Which program or aspect of the program? So this is another really good, say, table or strategy for you to utilize to kind of break down the evaluation plan is in its entirety. You may not be able to do this specifically in your particular groups or in at this particular time, but you can always go back and reference this because you will have copies of it. So questions: what do you want to know? Indicators, evidence, how will we know it? Timing, when should we collect the data? So if there's benchmarks, if there's 6 months and you want to do benchmarks every month or every 30 days for those 6 months, or for the then you would have benchmarks monthly to ensure and to be able to ensure and monitor the process. And then the data collections, the sources, the methods, the sample, and the instruments that you will utilize as part of the evaluation. Remember, this is evaluating the goals and objectives within a program or project description. And the sustainability demonstrates the long-term financial or programmatic viability of the project to be funded in the nonprofit organization. How will you sustain that? So you may have the funding for the first 3 years, but beyond those 3 years, if you don't get the funding back, how will you manage that? Or how will you sustain the program beyond that? Will you seek additional funding? That's usually what most people say. However, what plan do you have if that funding? So what other plans do you have? Do you have plans to increase your donor base, to move from federal funding, grant funding, to more sustainable funding, say investments, or those different types of things that the organization may do with the monies that they invest. Evidence of fiscal sustainability is a highly sought after characteristics of the success of a successful grant proposal. So sustainability, program sustainability framework, political support, communication, strategic planning. So a lot of these are the frameworks or ways that you can ensure sustainability. Program evaluation, ensuring that there's program evaluation so the program constantly improves. Program adaptation or adoption of specific program, especially evidence-based program components, partnerships that you may make, increasing organizational capacity or increasing partnerships, funding stability, diversifying funding sources, so not just one grant that runs your whole program or one funder that runs your whole program, and political support for it. If there's policies that are currently on the books or that are being discussed or that may that may change in the very near future. So how are you going to sustain your program if that funding say changes? Most recently, with the homeless population, with the end or the sanctions against tent cities being set up in the municipalities in the city, they have to be outside of the city structure. And so what that did, that displaced a lot of the homeless because they no longer could congregate, and they congregated primarily around the areas where the resources were, or the resources were built there because of the large homeless population that was there. And now they're being dispersed from public areas. And so they really can't access the resources. So either the resources are going to have to go to them, which is primarily what's probably going to happen, or the resources are going to have to go to them and actually find them, and because now they're scattered all over the place, and they can't congregate. Those used to be communities for all good, bad and ugly. Those used to be communities before the banning of them in public areas. Okay. And here are some of the references, in addition to other references that were provided previously. Thank you so very much. This ends our presentation. Thank you for listening.